Good morning, everyone. I was busy talking hockey with Colton and then I thought I better come in and chair the meeting, but just want to know what a win last night. Eh? Anyone with heart issues, overtime is not what you want it to go to, but not for the faint of heart. All right, call this committee of the whole meeting to order for Friday, 21st of February, 2025. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations across our vast regional district. And today we are located on Tecumseh territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumseh and respect the territory and land on which we gather today. We have the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting from December 13th.
Move the minutes.
Vice Chair Smith, seconded by Director Middleton. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor?
Yay.
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Moving straight along to delegations, pleased to have RCMP Superintendent Jeff Pelley, a proud Ashcroft lad, Ashcroft Cache Creek lad here. I can see Director Rant out of the corner of my eye. I thought, oh, better backtrack here. So proud Ashcroft and Cache Creek, a former resident, and he is here to talk to us, to give us an overview of the region. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. As indicated, I'm Jeff Pelley, the officer in charge of the Kamloops RCMP and Tecumseh RCMP. I know that there's a lot of various rural jurisdictions here, and as we know, with our strategies and our policing presentation, that crime doesn't stop at the boundaries of our municipalities. So we're very fortunate. Oh, it looks like we're jumping ahead here. So
Not sure what's
going on here.
Mind of its own. That's weird. Figure that out.
Okay, so it seems to be.
Try it again.
Thank you. Well, bear with us, some technical difficulties. Thank you. A lot of new faces that I haven't had an opportunity to meet. A little bit about my background. I'm in my 26th year as an RCMP officer. I grew up in the Cache Creek, Ashcroft area. I went to a university here, University of Cariboo College is when it was what it was called back then. So various areas of studies, and I joined the RCMP in 1999. I was previously posted here over 20 years ago as my second posting in general duty frontline in serious crime, and I've had the opportunity and to hold out to return here in 2021, and fortunate to take over from Superintendent Sid Leckie after being the officer in charge of Williams Lake for 6 years. So I really enjoy it. My spouse is a civilian member with the RCMP. Our family, we've all relocated here. We have no intentions of going anywhere. Kamloops and the surrounding area is my home. So, but looks like we're ready to go. It just keeps jumping ahead on us here, Justin. So there we go. As long as it doesn't jump. This will work. Thank you. So starting with our detachment priorities, we have 4 main priorities, a number of initiatives that fall under each of these. Obviously, the reduce, the prevent, and impact of our violent crimes is one, where we end up obviously focusing on our prolific, our priority offenders, as well as our new revoy offenders. We have a number of community support groups with, here we go again. So number of community support groups on the intervention and preventions. We work closely with our community service officers, our crime prevention, a lot of our community leadership with regards to focusing on initiatives to reduce crime, not just strictly through an enforcement. Our third initiative involved obviously our municipal traffic services, frontline policing, reducing collisions, impaired driving, and then obviously some aspects with regards to internal governance, policing modernization. I'm certain there will be questions, as recently we acquired the body worn camera system and we're live with respect to that. So a lot of technological advances that we're looking at, not only investigatively, but to demonstrate the hard work, transparency, and what we do day to day in policing, as well as capture evidence. Targeting our prolific offenders is one of the main priorities. Our crime reduction as well unit, we stood up a crime reduction unit in 2023. We have a number of initiatives with regards to enforcement. We focus on a number of areas, anywhere from the target of fentanyl and illicit drug trafficking or property crime. And I'll talk about those rates a bit later. Where I really want to differentiate is we may have crime rates in the city of Kamloops, but we have rural crime rates as well. We want to ensure there's not a displacement or focus on offenders of pushing them into the rural or vice versa, but with comprehensive strategies. Kamloops detachment, multiple units, a lot of horsepower, to be frank, admirable with our 5-year strategic plan, where we've grown and increased our officer complements with a growing population and policing modernization, but also work with our Kamloops Rural Detachment and our other surrounding rural detachments. Kamloops Rural Detachment has 14 officers. They don't have the specialized units that Kamloops Municipality has. They get support from outside provincial units. That's the provincial side that would serve the rural community. And we provide a service and support them. They have 4 Indigenous Policing Services unit. That is a specific unit separate from the provincial unit. And they have basically 10 officers with the basic provincial prioritization program that you've heard from the federal government. There was an increase of so many officers provincially in positions. We acquired 2 positions at Kamloops Detachment, one on the provincial side to increase the GD core policing, and then 1 public service employee to further support the administrative functions. So that has been a success. Those positions are filled. Kamloops Detachment is completely 100% full in their rotable rate while we continue to support them. We shift into intelligence-based policing. We work very closely with them, and we look at a very comprehensive offender management program that the provincial detachment becomes involved in. Shifting into our crime reduction unit, we've had a very extremely busy year with the crew unit, as we call them. Basically, we stood this up in 2023. We phased into it. It's been part of our strategic plan. We've increased the complement from 4 officers to 6 constables and a corporal in charge. And we continue to focus on it. I just give some examples here that prolific offenders were involved in 334 files. Charges against 1 prolific offender was 56 times, and 26 of those were associated to property offenses. We currently manage a number of prolific offenders. As a result, for some of the example, we've had 6 break and enter charges and 2 prohibited driving charges that were forwarded against one offender that resulted in a lengthy jail time and received 714 days jail. So that was a success. Again, we had a lot of multi-jurisdictional offenders in our community here, and we had a significant spike in break and enters. And just to show, separate from the response of GD Corps and our forensics proactively or trying to reactively investigate them, our crime reduction unit, working with our criminal intelligence section, identified an offender, and we were able to focus on 7 B&Es and 1 charge of possession of stolen property involving 1 offender, and they approved those charges. They approved 3 of the break and enter charges and possession of stolen property, and we resulted in that offender receiving 185 days jail. So that's some of the proactive measures that we continue to work with. We continued over the summer months, and we focused on some trends such as like stolen vehicles, and we had a number of those areas, and I'll demonstrate those in a bit. But we were able to isolate some offenders that were responsible for a number of stolen vehicles. And for example, within one week, we had such a high rate of stolen vehicles that we were able to focus on a prolific offender who was wanted on 7 arrest warrants at the time, which was a challenge in itself. And not only did we suppress the activity, but the vehicles thefts after a few offenders were arrested resulted in averaging 4 a week, and we experienced a 28% drop. So it really demonstrates the need for focusing on these offenders that go up, while we're advocating for some of the systemic changes as well with regards to the accountability in the court process. We have our general duty, our crime reduction unit, but we also have our Kamloops Action Response Team. They work amongst the street corridors. And again, those prolific offenders is really police driven, and we really drive that initiative. But we also have the REVOI offenders, and that's the Repeat Violent Intervention Initiative. And that's been very, very effective. Of late, we've had some challenges with certain offenders as well, and we work closely with Crown, Corrections, Probation, and there's a dedicated Crown Counsel if a person's a dedicated REVOI offender. So the Crowns would be engaged with each other. If we have a REVOI offender that has moved into your community and needs attention, that the Crown dedication meeting certain criteria is this offender's managed, just like very similar to our crime reduction unit that has assigned offenders. So it seems to be quite effective. On our REVOI front, firstly, we had 2 offenders enrolled in the program that were replaced, but regardless, 21 of the 21 offenders on our REVOI are occupied by 13 from this hub in the city of Kamloops. Currently, we have 10 in custody through this program, held into custody, and 1 is wanted. But we're seeing a very advantageous approach with respect to this as the assignment of that dedicated Crown prosecutor. So, and knowing these offenders, because they do move all over, and offenders who request obviously addiction treatment do appear to be doing more than most, but it's kind of anecdotal, so we continue to monitor that. But it's not saying that they're successful, but participants seem to experience longer periods between some of the setbacks when they are released. So we continue to focus on that. And just of note, some of our prolific offender data is like I said, that we've had offenders involved in 334 files one way or another. That's almost equivalent of what an officer would take annually in investigations. So just to give you some scope. We already jumped into that. So again, our Crown Counsel, we work very closely with them on comprehensive bail packages, our curfew breaches, fail to appears. Difference between prolific and priority and targeted offenders are they may not be a prolific offender, they may not be a REVOI offender, but we may have a new offender come in from a rural community, come from the lower mainland, or just be new to Kamloops, and we really start to focus on them, and we will shift accordingly when they're increasing calls or we have intelligence or offenses. So we may shift to a targeted priority offender with respect to that happening. So we have a number of enforcement strategies. There are some offenders on the electronic monitoring program. We focus on addresses of interest. We work very closely with the municipality. We have a very strong bylaw when a property becomes a nuisance property. We set some designations to it. We try to work with the community service officers, our homeowners, and basically focus on why an address specifically would be a crime address, or elevating to a crime address. So we outline hotspot area patrols and curfew checks that are frontline officers that are on 24/7. But we're also alive to those that are in the rural area and our rural officers doing checks or vice versa. So that intel is shared as well in case rural individuals migrate into the city or vice versa. So this is a little bit of an outline with respect to just in comparison of the rural area, the rural proper of Kamloops compared to the municipality, and it will show some increases and it will show some decreases. And to give some context, one or two files could have a substantial percentage increase in the rural areas, depending on the baseline and the types of file amounts. For example, both areas, both rural and the municipality, we've had significant decreases in break and enter to residences. So we've had, a 20% decrease in the municipality from focusing on offenders, and then an 80% decrease in the rural. But for this time period, and in comparison when previous quarters, a prime example is a reduction of 4 offenses in our rural communities really drove that down as an 80%. Not so easy in our municipalities, but the intelligence-based policing focusing on our offenders, our criminal intelligence unit that has crime analysts that are supported by the municipality, and there is a provincial crime analyst that supports your rural communities, is really what happens with respect to that. And then we do have district intelligence hubs, so we share with other detachments as well. So we did have an increase in our break and enters to businesses. I did speak about that, where we focused on some offenders and then we were able to acquire and get them into custody, and that really paid dividends. But as you can see, the green is indicating substantial reductions in areas. And where we really want to compare that to our rural area and our municipality to ensure there's not offender displacement. These are more the statistics, not the percentages, to give you some context. Like our crimes, our persons crimes, as you can see on the rural side, they've gone from 261 offenses up to 272, or in the municipality, 3,343, with a significant drop down to 3,189. So the variables are there, and it really demonstrates what the impacts are. And separate from individuals that commit specific crimes or an array of crimes, that's where we're able to focus and really push our efforts in a strategic manner for each of the communities. Again, here's all our reported files that have been with a substantial change. You'll notice that we've had a 79% and a 58% increase under the Controlled Drugs and Substance Act. That obviously has to do with public consumption and the decriminalization and the shifting back to it being an offense in public. So of course, we're going to have a dramatic increase when we had a substantial decrease back when illicit drug use was supported and under Section 56 of the CDSA with an exemption to use publicly. So that shifting is a substantial increase. So we have additional tools with respect to that, but we've had a 5% decrease in persons crimes, a 4% increase in our rural. Again, that's how we shift and focus accordingly to where our offender management is. This is just the overall actual criminal code separate from the reported offenses. These are defined criminal code percentages, and I'm quite proud to see some of the reductions in our municipality, which I look forward to presenting to Mayor and Council in the future. And we've had some increases, but in some of the rural areas. But like I say, if you look at those increases, some of them are only 5 or 6 instances, and they jump them substantially. So we continue to work with that collaborative approach with regards to multi-jurisdictional offenders. This just really refines our offenses and breaking it down with our more serious offenses. And you'll see a lot of NAs when we have a homicide. I mean, that's like, we're not going to have multiple, but the municipality had a homicide earlier in the year, and then obviously that was focused on, and that would have a significant increase just changing in one. So our robberies, that's a significant impact. You see that we haven't had robberies in our rural area, and we had a 58% reduction, and that's been focusing on some of our high-risk offenders where they're going to incite violence or pull a weapon. And that could be anything from robbing a business, a store, or a storefront, or an individual on the street. So we've had some great success with that. I did a case file here just to outline with what a prolific offender means to us. And basically, we have an offender that's in his mid-30s, and basically, the offender's history from, well, clearly there's a typo in that, but their first conviction was back in 2007, and they've been from the rural area into our community, and they've had a police contact every 6 days for the past 5 years. So to have 262 investigations since you were mid-30s is substantial. Is in their mid-30s now, since you were a young person, I should say, is substantial. So that kind of gives you some context of what that looks. So however, since 2019, he's generated most of the files, or she, in Kamloops, and basically that offender is currently in custody, and it really demonstrates what that looks like. So I just kind of wanted to give you a quick overview. These are the percentages of offenses. 21% is a person's offenses, 39% is property offenses, and 7% are drug offenses. So you can see how one offender can substantially impact our communities on the crime rates. And we currently are managing anywhere from 12 to 16 prolific offenders, and then, as you hear, upwards of 20 revoy offenders. So this gives you a little bit of a demonstration of it. And again, just with our responses and offenders, obviously experience has shown that only a few individuals are responsible for significant crime trends. And I guess prolific offenders typically are involved with crimes throughout multi-jurisdictional areas, your rural communities, multiple rural communities, or into our municipalities. So we have ongoing communication, obviously, with our local governments, our Crown, our community leadership, how we can make awareness and advocate for change in some of the areas where we need change. And then we work on a prevention aspect. So, but basically, by identifying these prolific or repeat offenders, if we continue to focus on them, and since the stand up of our crime reduction unit and our evolving target enforcement unit, we were able to certainly pay some dividends. So our target enforcement unit is one of our units that worked closely here. That's completely separate from our crime reduction unit. Worked closely with regards to some of our localized gang conflict and disputes within the drug trafficking trade. And we've had significant seizures throughout the community, as well as suppress some of the major threats to the community over the last year. And we've implemented a covert asset support team, which continues to yield results for us. So that's been increasing our intelligence capacity to really focus on those offenders and identifying planned events or violence and disrupting them before they occur. So we've taken a real progressive approach on that. The conflict locally, you may have seen back in the spring, had me before the community doing a public information disclosure. Was one of the first ones within our Southeast District to stay ahead and warn the public. Obviously not to be in the company of two high-risk individuals, Cameron Kohler, Justin Hunt, and basically focusing on shootings that occurred at the Ramada Hotel, Sandbar Grill, and our 10th Street. So our investigations are very comprehensive, and basically with our disclosure and subsequent review in the future here, we'll be recommending additional charges to the BC Public Prosecution Service, including attempted murder and discharge of firearms. So we've had many of these individuals in custody or under bail conditions as a result. So one of the individuals has since received a 40-year custody and remains in custody to this day. So, but we continue to focus with respect to our provincial threat enforcement program and a lot of funded programs on focusing on offenders in our community. And we've been obviously upwards of $275,000 supported by that. That is funded by the provincial government to allow us to enforce on individuals throughout our municipality and our community. We were part of a larger operation with the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, and we did work closely with regards to them involving a lab that was producing significant amounts of illicit drugs outside this community, but in one of our rural communities, and it yielded a substantial amount of illicit drugs, anywhere from cocaine, methamphetamine, and precursors in its manufacturing of these drugs. And basically, we continue to work with our Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit with regards to that project that was in our rural community. So that being said, I certainly open it up to questions. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. However, some of your rural communities I may not oversee, but certainly, as I state, crime doesn't stop at the boundaries of our municipality or our communities, and we have a very comprehensive strategic approach to those, and we'll continue to focus on it and make our communities safer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone, I've got Director Houghton, Director Sow, Director Morris, Director Getz, anyone else on the first go round? All right, Director Houghton.
Thank you, Chair Roden. I remember the last time you were here, Superintendent Pelley, I mentioned the importance of the position of the livestock superintendent. That position was created a number of years ago, and it's been sometimes the RCMP will think it's not important, they'll pull it, and then BC Cattlemen and others and rural people voice their opinion, we get it back. But a number of years ago, we were fortunate enough to have the services of Corporal Corey Lapine, and I know Chair Roden has some time with Corporal Lapine when he was stationed in Ashcroft during the COVID times. But I just want to stress how important that position is to rural BC. We've only got one of those in the province, and I was going to make this short, but it tells you how important the position is. Last weekend, it all came to fruition on how important that service is. Plus, I'm involved with a group ownership identification and the livestock identification branch that we've put together 6 emergency preparedness trailers full of gear that at the time of an accident on a public highway, that we have basically material that we can assist in rescuing the livestock and assisting the situation. And last Saturday, you build these trailers and you think it's like a fire truck. You don't want to use them, but they do come into use. And last Saturday it came to be where there was a major accident at Malacqua, where a loaded cattle liner that was coming from Williams Lake headed to Fort Macleod collided with a pickup truck with 4 young boys in it just outside of Malacqua. And it was very tragic. 2 of the boys deceased. And then the livestock liner, of course, rolled on its side, and you know what happens when that happens. But I just want to stress how important that Corporal Lapine was dispatched from Kamloops by the your Revelstoke division, and assisted along with Bob Miller from our livestock identification branch, and And the local veterinarian and the local president of BC Cattlemen happened to live at Malaqua, Werner Stump. And together, the group really assisted in making a tragedy the best it could be on that given day. And I just want to thank the services of the RCMP for Corey's service and everything that happened and everybody that was involved that day. It's sad to lose two young men. They were on their way back from a memorial service of that young lad that drowned in Shuswap Lake. So it's like a tragedy upon a tragedy. And but Corporal Lepine's services were greatly thanked for that day. And he does a lot of work in livestock theft and just rural issues that might not have anything to do with livestock, but kind of because he can walk the walk and talk the talk. And I just hope that you can mention to your superiors on how important that position is. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I certainly will pass along the information. I do stress the fact that they're valuable in service, given the delivery that they do provide throughout the province, and we're fortunate to have that based out of Kamloops here.
Thank you, Director Sao.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Pelley, for your information. Just a question regarding I saw the stats for charges recommended. Do you know of the ratio between charges recommended and actual prosecution? And is that ratio have any trending directions up or down in the province? And lastly, if there's any difference you see in the rural charges recommended versus prosecuted, and then urban city recommended versus prosecution? Thank you.
Director Sal, very good question with respect to charges and recommendations. So we have an array of files that one offender may be recommended multiple charges or a single charge. And we do the outlines with regards to the prolific offenders. I don't have the statistics in front of me, where we do assess rural to the municipality overall in their portfolio. They attach to the individual, and we have our comp stat and our intelligence-based meetings where we certainly do assess that, and work closely with Crown on individuals that have a number of charges or pending charges or being released with a number of conditions. But I don't have the defined amount for the report to councils or broken down at this point with regards to individual charges. We focus on the offender and the multi-jurisdictional, but a very legitimate question, and I hope that answers.
Director Morris.
Thank you very much, and then through the chair. So Lee Morris, and it's Area P, which has a substantial population. We've seen a fair amount of growth over the past few years, but we're sort of sitting all in at around 8,000 just within Area P. A few years ago, when I was earlier in my term as a director, we were struggling with, and we did get assistance from the detachment for sure, where we were short-staffed in terms of rural policing. And the response as we went forward was successful. And I see you're up at 4 again, and pleased to see that. So my question may in fact be more of a longer term question, certainly within Area P itself, and I suspect TNRD region in general. We're going to see growth of numbers of people moving to this area, and so I think what we're going to see is a longer term issue that we need to be continuing to address with respect the detachment and rural policing in particular. So I just wanted to place that marker, one that says thank you and one that says look out. It's going to get larger over time, and we want to continue that partnership and that growth in that way.
Madam Chair, Director Morrison, thank you for those comments. I can assure you with our resource and our roadable strategies, we continue to advocate for increased officers that are in line with the growth of our communities, crime trends, or what's required. I can speak to our rural Tecumlipse area. We were successful this year of acquiring that an additional resource in line with that. And I do make those applications where it's very informative from these type of settings as well, and being able to present to you right to our metrics and our strategies to indicate where our greatest need is. Each rural detachment has their specific reporting line, and those are assessed, I can assure you, as I'm part of those staffing roundtables, and where they not only assess and focus on ensuring your complement is fully staffed, but also assessing the increases or where the demand or need is. And there are follow-ups annually, or if there are increased developments within that year that continue to be focused on. And I can speak for our success here, but I can also speak for the teams that advocate for each of your rural communities and those processes as well. So thank you.
Director Getz.
Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question, and I guess this is going to be your personal maybe response. I work closely with the RCMP in our community. We meet every month and more often than that. But why is Crown so reluctant to move on charges recommended by the RCMP? Case in point, we have one gentleman that has 58 charges against him. Some as soonest as 24 hours before he's arrested again. He spends less than 15 minutes in the detachment, and he's back out on the street again. And this is continuous. Like he's not the only one. We have 28. We have, we have this all the time. So why, and maybe you could school us a little bit on how we could probably help that position change, where we could, and I know it's bail reform to a certain degree, but I'm just wondering why they're so reluctant to move on your recommended charges. I've never understood it.
Madam Chair, to Director Getz, very good question. So each case is assessed on a case-by-case basis, and the evidence, and it's looked at objectively with respect to it. So I can't specifically say why Crown wouldn't charge in your specific scenario, but we do see it, and we do have challenges with respect to certain offenders, or the lack of evidence, or what we can prove, or that them being released immediately or under certain conditions. And that's where we've really tried to strategize and focus on our highest risk offenders to continue to not let them reoffend in the community. There are specific cases, absolutely, even within our detachment, where we've had some resolutions that were not favorable based on what we believe was the best product put forward. And we continue to work with Crown and advocate. Bail reform, as you say, is one avenue, working closely with your localized Crown on our processes and our charge recommendations. But they're the independent body that laid the charge, where we gather the evidence and put the best case forward. That's why we've looked at developments of units, which can be challenging in smaller communities. I understand that. And you look at police modernization and how we can increase our best product, our training, our evidence through other lenses as well, and how we acquire that, and obviously to put the best product forward. But we have had some repeat offenders that have been immediately released too, and it's whether it's the lack of a charge, or Crown Counsel laying the charge, or the court releasing. Those are all different aspects that get examined on a case-by-case basis. So we continue to work closely with our Crown on some of those initiatives that I have outlined, but also look for advocacy with respect to our repeat offenders, and why they're constantly repeatedly released into our community, where there may be challenges. And some investigations, we find it takes a lot of time to complete the investigations, or there could be lab reports, or there could be DNA evidence, or those types of things. So each one is really case specific, but we do see challenges, especially on the offenders that have larger records and then they're breached and then they're released right away. And I can speak to a number of different incidents where actually our Crown is actually opposed to release and then they are released into our community. But we have a number of strategies where we look at it if they're a high risk offender and we do try to focus back on them. So it can be difficult. And yeah, there are times that our officers and our community is frustrated as well at our level. So thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Alternate Director Ryken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed that the crime statistic data is 22 to 23 data, and I appreciate that the 2024 data might not be readily available. I'm wondering if Superintendent Pelley can give us an indication of when 2024 data might be available and whether there's an opportunity to see what those statistics look like before the end of the year, but also anecdotally, if you can share some comments on what you see in terms of activity levels between the 2023 numbers and over the 2024 year.
Thank you for that. Our statistics did outline the changes from 2021 all the way to 2024 to the end of the year. If we could bring it back up, I do have the statistics here. So I know there were some aspects that did not, but just see here if it's not. That's a historical one. Oh, correct. Right here is more of our rural change with respect to the 2023 and 2024. And we tried to break those down. Now, we did a year-end report up to December 31st, 2024. As you know, that is the RCMP's Q3 for reference because we go April to April, whereas the municipalities go calendar year. So we did look at our comparisons right up to the year end of 2023, 2024, and then we did cross-reference it to the previous mapping as well. So I have no problem leaving and sending some of these statistics over to the group that if you want to have a deeper dive into it. But that one there had, but we did focus on what those percentages were, and I thank you for that.
Anyone else have any questions? Director Lepso.
Yeah, thank you for that. I like stats. When you're saying municipal, is that Kamloops or is that all of the municipalities in the TNRD?
That would be the Kamloops City proper.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I just want to mention in my other job, I see a lot of press releases from RCMP all over the province. And I've noticed, I don't know if I just got added to a mailing list all of a sudden or if things have stepped up a bit, but I've noticed a lot of press releases coming out of the Kamloops detachment from Crystal Evelyn, which is awesome. Because a lot of people from our rural communities do travel into Kamloops and should know about things that are going on and possible incidents that they might have information on. If I might make a suggestion, I know something in our rural communities, something I hear and see quite often is we have a higher proportion of seniors and they are more vulnerable to scams of all kinds. And I sometimes see from other detachments, press releases coming out noting the prevalence of a particular scam. Back in the day, it was the Canada Revenue Agency scam. Now it's scams involving Bitcoin, it's your grandson, I'm in prison, I need bail money. That's a big one. Just a suggestion that might be something if the Kamloops detachment being so large and having much bigger data set to draw on than say Ashcroft or Clinton, possibly if just pinpoint or highlight if there is a particular scam that's doing the rounds. That's just a handy thing to know because seniors are quite vulnerable to this.
Madam Chair, thank you for that. We do put those out, but mainly for the Kamloops proper and our rural detachment, but we certainly will have a look at that. We have an exceptional media relations officer that we'll continue to assess that. And I recall some recent, I know exactly the scams. It's pretty brazen when I get one to my work cell phone. And lead them forward, just so you know, but thank you for that.
And as we see with crimes of all types, if it's happening in Kamloops, it's probably either happening or about to happen in the rural communities surrounding Kamloops. So, yeah, awesome. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Superintendent Pelley? No, nothing online? All right. Well, thank you very much.
I thank you for your time, and I expected a body worn camera question, but clearly we're doing something correct here.
Oh,
I'm not wearing one right now for the record, but I do.
it's all right. We're recording the meeting, so it's okay.
Thank you kindly, your body worn camera. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right, we move on to rural and remote internet connectivity, and Mr. Vieira. You
Thank you,
are
Chair.
up at the plate.
I'm actually going to turn it right over to Kevin Skrepnik, our Manager of Community Emergency Services, to present this report.
Mr. Skrepnik was on deck. He's up at the plate.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yeah. No, good morning, folks. And just on a personal note, Superintendent Pelley, as you mentioned previously, was in charge of the Williams Lake Detachment, and we worked together extensively in 2017 during the evacuation up there, and certainly understands a lot of the challenges we encounter in that realm. So excellent to have him with the Kamloops Detachment here. So yes, switching gears a little bit in terms of the rural and remote internet connectivity. We have a report in your agenda, and then there was also a hot off the presses CRTC decision that Director Grenier forwarded to Mr. Vieira and myself this morning. That's quite topical because it speaks to precisely some of the things that we've got in the report here. So I'll do a quick presentation, and then we do have a recommendation, and I'm sure Director Grenier is going to have some thoughts with regard to the CRTC decision that just came out today. So yeah, we're going to talk a bit about the background, current state of where we're at right now, the potential role of what TNRD could be doing in this space. And then, as I mentioned, a recommendation just in terms of direction for staff from the committee that would go to the board for formal adoption there. So when we talk about broadband internet, kind of that definition, what that means has certainly changed in the last few years. Typically, when we talked about broadband, that was very specifically, you know, what we call like a landline internet connection, either through ADSL or cable, things like that. Obviously, as technology has progressed, we see things like satellites, much faster cell phone connection speeds, things like that. So in terms of the language we use in this report, typically when we're talking about broadband, it is more so like the ground-based physical cable coming into your house. But obviously, there's certainly some new solutions here that we're going to be looking at. So the CRTC has an established what they call universal service objective, which is 50 megabytes download and 10 megabytes upload speeds. And basically, that's what they consider to be the kind of benchmark for what I'll say is modern internet usage. It's certainly not what you absolutely need, you know, if you're checking your emails, checking your Facebook, things like that. But if you want to be able to consistently do things like video calling, video streaming, if you're, say you're watching your kind of television through your internet connection as well as doing other things, you generally need to be into this, what they call 50-10 ratio. And obviously the importance of that has only increased in the last few years in the context of kind of the post-COVID world with lots of folks working remotely. And then also the fact that we see a lot of fairly critical services being delivered virtually as well, certainly healthcare being a primary one. So as of 2021, and I'll get into some of the reports that were done in the past, it was estimated that less than 15% of the households and businesses in our rural areas, in the electoral areas of the TNRD, met this 50-10 threshold. Now, that number, I will say, and there's an appendix to the report that is the executive summary of the 2021 TANX report that we'll talk about shortly here. That 15% number, it does, in areas where there was no data or missing data, it was an assumption that those points were not reaching the 50-10 threshold. So that 15% number is probably should be taken with a grain of salt. And of course, it is now 4 years old at this point as well. But I think we're all quite aware that this is definitely a challenge in many rural areas. So as I said, in 2020, a report was commissioned by the board. It was paid for using what was at the time gas tax funding, basically to form a regional broadband strategy for the TNRD. And again, in the context of this 2021 report, broadband was specifically referring to the actual landline infrastructure where something's physically coming into a home or business to deliver internet. So the executive summary of that report is attached to the report in your agenda. It laid out well the challenges that we've got here. It did kind of segment out the underserved areas in the TNRD into about 25 different project areas that could be tackled. But the reality was that to actually put infrastructure in place to deliver this, landline broadband service, conservatively was going to be anywhere from 5,000 to 15,000 per, home or business served. So prohibitively expensive, and the figures varied quite widely, obviously just depending on the location and the economy of scale in terms of how many potential customers were going to be in that area. So not entirely surprising that, it's been a challenge in terms of getting telecom providers to, make these investments. In terms of TNRD's involvement, this report was commissioned. It was approved by the board in June 2021. Currently, this is not a service that we have established in terms of doing this. It's not something we're mandated to do. We do, on paper, have economic development functions for all 10 electoral areas, but only 3 of them, A, B, and I, tax to actually support that. And currently, none of that is allocated in terms of internet connection. So in terms of where we're at right now, so as I said, this 2021 report was certainly money well spent, but obviously given kind of the technological realities we're in, things have already changed quite a bit since then. So primarily, we've now got a really rapidly expanding network of what are called low Earth orbit satellites, or LEO satellites. So this is what most folks will be most familiar with is like the Starlink product. Although there certainly are others. Now, this has really proliferated in the last few years. It has gotten more affordable, I'll say more, but is certainly still more expensive than kind of the more traditional methods, terrestrial, so either through a cell or landline. And certainly as products like Starlink have expanded, we have seen a pretty significant uptick. I go into lots of areas in my role with the regional district, and more and more I'm seeing these dishes on people's houses. I think it's been pretty widely adopted, and certainly like in the 2.5 years I've been in my role with the community services department, we've had, to my knowledge, no increase from the public directly to us around looking for expanded broadband. So I think folks, even though the affordability is certainly an issue, this option has definitely been attractive for folks, and a lot of people have gone that route. And obviously, when we were talking about like the infrastructure cost of actually getting fiber optic cable to individual residents, logistically a lot simpler in terms of just utilizing something where a ground-based satellite dish can pick up that signal. So there are some funding options available. The Connected Communities BC Fund is through the province, but it does kind of work in concert with some federal money through the Universal Broadband Fund. So CCBC is designed for organizations that are going to actually be building and maintaining new infrastructure to deliver internet. And it covers, in most cases, 75% of the costs of construction. That can get up to 90 based on the remoteness of locations. In TNRD, I don't think any of our areas would be considered remote by the definition of this program. Partnerships with First Nations can also increase that percentage up to a max of 90. My conversations with some other organizations that have gone through this process, they did just kind of caution that, you know, if this is something we were to entertain, we should be planning around the 75, because getting to that 90 requires a really ironclad, formal, structured agreement with First Nations, which, depending on the nature of the project, could be potential. You know, that might be something we could do. It might not be. Just again, depending on the location and what we were looking to do. Another thing, and maybe before I dive into this, just to note, you know, there's a lot of kind of ongoing flux in this sector. Things are changing quite rapidly. As I said just this morning, we've been advised of a CRTC decision that's fairly, I think, a success, and speaks to Director Granier's advocacy around it. But when we've been participating with other regional districts on working groups and stuff like that around connectivity. We were just on one a few weeks ago, and you know, the PowerPoint deck that was being delivered actually by staff from the province from the Connected Communities program. The PowerPoint was only like 4 or 5 days old, and a lot of the content in it was already out of date because the CRTC decisions had changed. Of course, this was also as we were kind of navigating the potential of tariffs and things like that. So as an example, you know, regulatory decisions can trigger telecom providers who had entered into a CCBC project to pull out. That same decision could actually be incentive for other providers to enter into agreements. So a lot's changing quickly in this, both from a regulatory standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint. In terms of you know, if we were to go through the process, if this is something we wanted to get into, I've got some figures here for illustration. Now, this is based on conversations we've had with vendors who kind of specialize not so much in, you know, these aren't telecommunications companies, but these are companies that kind of look at the project management of getting these systems built. And basically, the concept here would be publicly owned infrastructure. So whether that's cellular towers, fiber optic networks that would be built utilizing this funding, owned by potentially, you know, a regional district or a, you know, economic development agency. They would build the infrastructure, and then it would actually be leased out, and telecom providers would then utilize it and operate it to provide service to residents. There is a lot involved in this process. So you know, based on the conversations we've had, we'd be looking likely in the neighborhood of about $100,000, I should say, for multiple phases of actually preparing such a proposal. There's some mandatory performance testing and things like that that have to be done through CRTC. Once a proposal's in, it's a multi-year process, and I'll show an example shortly here of kind of how involved it can be. If a proposal is successful, there's fairly complex negotiations that have to occur between, you know, the proponent, the CRTC, telecommunications companies, things like that. And then, as I mentioned, you know, the CCBC funding, potentially, we might only be looking at 75%. So, you know, many of these projects are multi-million dollar, some of them in the hundreds of millions. A local example we'll be looking at is 30, but still 25% of 30 million is still a significant number. So because of a lot of these complexities, most of these connected community projects aren't actually being led by local governments. It's typically telecommunications companies that are going after this money so that they can expand their infrastructure, or also non-government organizations. So As an example, just over in the Shuswap, the Shuswap Economic Development Society has applied for some Connected Community BC money. They're 2 years into the process. It's still not at final approval, but they've had good progress so far. So this project that they're working on is in the neighborhood of $30 million, and it would be for the delivery of broadband via fiber optic cables to a number of underserved areas in the Shuswap. Now, this is being led by an economic development society, and then they've actually created a separate corporation that's a cooperative, and that's what's going to, if they're successful, would actually be the ones kind of building and owning the infrastructure. And then again, that cooperative would then basically go out for proposal to have telecommunications companies come in and utilize that infrastructure. So in this example, there's no direct involvement from the CSRD, it's the local government in this case. There certainly are local governments utilizing this funding, but they are in urban examples. So you see examples like the city of Campbell River, the city of New Westminster, other areas where they have obviously a higher population density, existing infrastructure, and they're utilizing this money to expand that, as opposed to kind of delivering it to remote areas with infrastructure on the ground. So with all that said, kind of what should our role be as the regional district? So this is a slide that was actually originally from the broadband strategy report that was done in 2021, but I think it does a really good job of kind of laying out what we could be doing, what the level of responsibility and commitment would be, and certainly in time and funding. I'd say, so you've kind of got 3 different levels here: advocacy, moving up to support, and then like full participation. I would say realistically, in terms of where we're at right now in TNRD, we're probably somewhere between, you can see on the far left there is this box that's labeled hope. We're probably somewhere between hope and advocacy. We did commission this report, but we haven't really taken any action or direction on it since 2021. We have directors such as Director Grenier who are advocating on individual situations in this area, but we don't really have kind of a overall structure to it. We've been fairly reactive. Moving up to the support level, we'd be looking at devoting some more staff time to this, looking at opportunities, reaching out to telecom providers, things like that, and I'll flesh this out a little bit further. Whereas participation, we'd be looking at this kind of full meal deal, likely service establishment, pursuing funding, multi-year process, significant assets coming into our inventory as well as part of that. So on the advocacy piece, again, this is sort of what, I'll step back here. So, looking at this slide from 2021, I think there's certainly pieces on the advocacy kind of tier that we're certainly not fully leveraging yet, but we're kind of in that realm. So generally, status quo is the advocacy piece, ongoing opportunities, generally fairly reactive. There are opportunities for input. I realize you can't read this slide here, but this came out from the CRTC a few days ago. So something that's being in the process of coming together right now is the federal government is introducing a subsidy for what they're calling far north internet subscribers. So this is going to be for, there's a few communities in BC that qualify this. It's primarily the far north, so, Fort Nelson, things like that. But certainly most of the Yukon and Northwest Territories fall into this. And this is going to be a direct subsidy from the federal government to the telecom providers to reduce the cost of people's monthly internet. And that would include things like Starlink. So right now, what this was from UBCM, because CRTC is looking for input on this, obviously we understand the far north is a specific, circumstance, but could this concept also be looked at, for remote and rural residents? Maybe not the same level of subsidy, and how much that subsidy is going to be hasn't been determined yet. But given the kind of shifting technology, maybe this is a route that we should be looking at in terms of advocacy. Potentially, tax incentives, things like that. To put it in perspective, Starlink, as an example, and there are other providers, you're typically looking at about $140 a month So generally internet, if you're just getting it through TELUS, through cable or landline, whatever it might be, is usually probably about half that, depending on what your package might be. So if we wanted to kind of increase our involvement a bit, we'd be looking at this support tier. So, allocating some staff time in terms of doing some research on this, becoming aware of kind of the state of the industry. There are, as I mentioned, some working groups that are ongoing that we've been involved with. UBCM has a regional communities knowledge sharing network that meets generally quarterly to monthly, and shares out information in this very useful group that we've been involved with for quite some time. So continuing with things like that, but starting to do a bit more proactive work, reaching out to telecom companies in the area to understand what their kind of impending projects are going to be. Taking some of the findings from the 2021 report and looking at how we would prioritize some of those project areas that have been set up in there, looking at if we need to study other areas. Partnership opportunities. So I'll use the Shuswap one as an example. If their proposal goes forward and if that CCBC money comes through and they build this network, they're perfectly willing to look at Chase and surrounding areas becoming part of that cooperative. It wouldn't be funded through the grant, but the infrastructure would be built and in place at that point. So it would really just be sort of a partnership. But to put it in perspective, even, I was having conversations with the Shuswap economic development folks. One of the areas in question in TNRD that is definitely identified as underserved. We've heard anecdotally that TELUS has actually already gotten CCBC money to go in there themselves and build some enhanced cellular infrastructure. So again, so much is happening at once, lots of different players. So there's a lot we could be doing if we had a bit more involvement and awareness. Communications with regulators, and this, again, the CRTC decision we've got here speaks to some of the success around the advocacy there. And then just the ongoing initiatives that are happening through UBCM, letters of support that we could be issuing from the board, things like that. If we were to go to the kind of full meal deal and actually participate in this, it would be quite an undertaking. And I'd suggest if we wanted to get to this point, we'd likely need to look at doing it, in phases here. But if we wanted to actually go into this whole hog, yeah, we'd likely be looking at a service establishment process or the creation of some sort of a nonprofit entity focused on either economic development or similar to what they're doing in the Shuswap. Obviously, given the size of TNRD, this could be multiple different entities depending on the kind of scale of the project areas we're looking at. As I alluded to, fairly significant upfront costs with no guarantee of success. Just to get these applications together and do some of the mandatory testing, we're looking at least $100,000. If we are successful, still looking at pretty substantial taxation or borrowing to cover the uncovered portion, which could be as much as 25%. Multi-year process. So like I said, the Shuswap group, which is doing a lot of things right, and they're definitely seen as being a bit of a leader on this, is still more than 2 years into it and doesn't yet have like a firm commitment from the province. And I know certainly, asset management's a hot topic right now. This would involve us adopting significant new assets in terms of public critical infrastructure, whether that's cell towers, landline equipment, things like that, land title requirements. And then there are significant responsibilities tagged in with being a critical infrastructure operator. We already have that to a degree with some of our water systems and things. This would kind of bring that into a new level. The ongoing operational and maintenance costs as well, once this network's built out. And again, as I've spoken to, just given how quickly technology is changing, something that we begin now might not come to fruition for many, many years. And by the time it does, technology may have outpaced what we've been working on. And just to kind of give a bit of a comparison. So as I said, in BC, most of the local government driven projects have been fairly urban examples. Kind of the closest analog I could find in terms of kind of like a local government led initiative to utilize this funding and build some publicly owned telecom is Pictou County, Nova Scotia. Now, and it's excellent thing they've done there, but just to put it in perspective, as we often speak about the size of TNRD, Pictou County is 6% the size of the TNRD and has 4 times our population density. So the economy of scale, the business case of putting something like this in place, again, this was the most rural example we could find. A very different apples to oranges comparison, just given the size of our land base. And I would say too, having spent some time in Nova Scotia, the geography being quite a bit different as well, in terms of the difficulty of putting some of this infrastructure in place. So with all that said, we do have a recommendation, but it is basically for the community to discuss this and pass it on to the board for a decision of what we want to do here. So advocacy, which would essentially be the status quo. Again, there are opportunities that come along beyond what we're doing now, but we wouldn't be looking to devote a whole lot of extra time and resource to this, kind of continuing to react to what comes along. Moving up to the support level, where certainly some increased staff time and resources looking at this, trying to suss out some opportunities, reach out to some of the players, look at potential partnerships, and then the participation level, which would be fully becoming going into the process of getting the grants to actually become the owners of this infrastructure. And that's it from me. If Mr. Vieira has anything further?
Yeah, I'll just provide a few comments on this, kind of the options that are on the screen right now. So just to, I guess maybe to repeat it or say a different way what Kevin just spoke about. So the advocacy, obviously that's our current status quo with our current resources. So at this point, that's the direction that we're going to continue to go. But if we wanted to bring this forward, because there's been a lot of discussion at the board level, specifically the EA director committee level, there's been a lot of discussion around this. So if the board wants us to move towards support or participate level, then our next step would to do a deeper dive into what that actually means in terms of dollars and cents that we would need to allocate to that. But we wanted to bring this first, just to have that discussion to see if there's any interest in changing our current direction on advocacy.
All right, thank you very much. And I guess hands. I'm going to start with Director Grenier because he's had his hand up for a little while, but if I saw correctly, I saw Director Laird's hand go up, Director Morris, Director Sal. Just a moment. I can print quickly or I can print legibly. That's Thorpe. Anyone else in the first go round? All right, Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jamie and Kevin, for that presentation. This morning, in preparation for today's meeting, I checked the CRTC website, and lo and behold, there's a decision on the Tranquil Valley situation. And just in a nutshell, for directors, TELUS had proposed paying those people $1,400 and a connection to Starlink. The CRTC has ordered TELUS to pay them an additional $4,500 roughly. So just shy of $6,000. And the CRTC has said that should work for 3 years, and that they're encouraging the telecommunications companies to find new solutions, very much pointing to satellite solutions and emerging technologies. Mr. Vieira and I haven't had much of a chance to talk, but I concur with Mr. Vieira's comment to me this morning that it looks like CRTC is leaning towards solutions like satellite and Starlink as part of the solution. I think that the information that has come out today from the CRTC will be will not just be discussed at our board table, but at the TELUS board table. The Bell Canada was also a commentary agency. Connected Communities was involved, and I think that there are going to be some decisions made in part based on this decision. So I think when I see the 3 choices, advocacy, support, and participate, I don't think we're in a position to jump in and start building networks and cell towers, but I sure would hate to take the foot off the gas pedal right now. We're doing quite a good job with advocacy. There may be after some analysis of this CRTC decision, some reason to commit some funds in the support level, but I would only want to do that after staff have had a reasonable chance to digest what was circulated 45 minutes before this meeting. I do think that there's a real opportunity for the TNRD with the advocacy that Corbin has done and our board has done with Connected Communities. I think that there is a real potential that the 4 sites that we had, or the 5 sites that we had theoretically talked about at the EA level, and the sites that we had proposed to staff as starting points, that there might be some traction there. So those are my initial comments on both this presentation today and the news that came out this morning. I think that there's a real opportunity to provide those 85% of people that in the rural TNRD that don't have broadband, that there's some opportunity to improve their situation.
Thank you, Director Grenier. And thank you for your advocacy on behalf of the residents of the Tronquil area. I think that probably played a part in the CRTC's decision to increase the amount of compensation that they're given and look for more solutions. Director Laird, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I remember, I'm not sure how many years ago it was, but Caslo had quite a presentation on how they worked in their community to increase broadband. It was quite a unique presentation. It was a community effort. And I was wondering if we could get the Caslo report on how they put that together for our next committee of the whole meeting for our EA directors. This is basically obviously an EA situation. Most of the municipal directors don't have too much of a problem with connectivity. So could we get a report back to see what they did in Castle? And that was quite an interesting presentation. And I don't think it involved a lot of money. They had some quite unique ideas on how to bounce. I don't know how far they've expanded around Caslo. So if you could have a look at that and bring it back to an EA directors meeting, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Director Morris.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm curious what the aggregate numbers within the TNRD itself, just what is the, if we have a figure, the percentage of our constituent population that have absolutely no service? This just as a benchmark. That's a simple question, I think, Kevin or Jamie.
Yeah, Chair, through to Director Morris. Yeah, I don't know if we have a number for those who have absolutely. So, and I guess here's the issue is that theoretically anyone can buy a Starlink. So on paper, anyone can be served by that method. And the kind of speeds that Starlink delivers or a similar service are considered broadband speeds. Like they're in excess of that 50-10 benchmark from the federal government. Of course, it's an affordability issue. So to Director Granier's point, like really to put it bluntly, like these satellite-based options are a fantastic solution in a lot of these rural and remote areas. The sticking point is the affordability. $500-ish in terms of the equipment costs, and then $140 a month, which is quite a bit more than traditional internet.
Director Sao.
Thank you, Chair. 2 comments. One, actually just on the fly regarding Caslo. Actually, a resident of Area A recently had, for the lack of a better term, put me in, kind of grilled me about that topic and used Caslo as an example. Why aren't you doing what Caslo did? Why isn't a TNRD doing this? When I did more research, I looked into it, and Caslo, it was more directed by residents. It wasn't, they formed a nonprofit society that was then able to channel grants. So I went back to the residents and said, hey, you know, and I made a post about electoral area grant and aid in general, discretionary grant. If somebody wants to form a society to, you know, give directions to an area they're interested in, like, you know, connectivity, I would, you know, be more than happy to direct discretionary grant to get you guys off the ground. So that's something, yeah, I guess, will be part of when you guys do your, staff does the report on Caslow.
Yeah, and Chair, through to Director Sao, in terms of the example that Directors Granier and Sao or Directors Laird and Sao have brought up here, if folks are interested, like if you go to just Google Connect Communities BC, they have kind of like case studies of a lot of the communities, and Caslow's on there. So there's already a report, and I think actually a video talking about how the Caslow example came together. So for folks who are interested, yeah, that's up there and available now.
Thank you, Director
Oh,
Thorpe.
sorry, I had
Oh,
two.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then secondly, more so about the recommendation before us. Yeah, you know, I think a lot of EA directors have been advocating for connectivity, but from other orders of government, because it pertains to not just broadband accessibility, but also public safety as well, such as Upper Clearwater, Wellsquare Park evacuation and such. So I'm all for advocating for telecoms, but my concern, you know, as we look at what's on the table, if we jump from hope to full participation, my concern is, and thank you, Kevin, or Mr. Skretnik, for comprehensive, you know, SWOT analysis of the participation level. It's like buying a computer back in the 1990s. You risk sitting on an obsolete piece of equipment rapidly these days with telecoms, as you highlighted. So as a board, I feel the general atmosphere is we're trying to cut back on non-essential spending, so we reduce taxation requisitions. We can potentially be sitting on a multi-million dollar use of taxpayers' money that it's going to be obsolete by the time we get this through. So I would be against jumping into full participation. And regarding changing to from advocacy to support level, question to Mr. Vieira. Yeah, if you could, I guess at the next report, add in like how much staff time are we looking at to divert, and also if it would mean we need to shift away from some of our other current projects, that would be something, some information that would affect our decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So through the chair. Yeah, that's a very good question. The short answer is yes. Would we need to reallocate time? Yes. So that's why we haven't at this point done a deep dive into what it would cost for moving to support and participate. What we're saying is currently we're doing advocacy. If this committee wants to recommend to the board that we change that to some other level, then we can come back with more information on it. And yeah, using the support example, if we move it up to support, yes, we could probably do that with current staff. Would that mean that we'd have to sideline other things that we're currently working on? Yes. So this kind of keeps coming up as a discussion at the board level, which it's important, and I get it, and we have it built in our strategic plan to do advocacy. But we're wanting, from a staff perspective, some more clear direction from the board of how much time and resources we should be devoting to this on our end. I would back to the chair's comments about the advocacy work that Director Grenier was doing for Tranquille. That was his initiative as an electoral area director that had some excellent results as board advocacy work. And we're assisting where we can from a staff perspective on that at this point, and that's solely where we're at a staff perspective. So I'll put it back, I guess, to the committee for discussion on that. If they want to provide different direction for us to not do advocacy and increase that, then we would have to go back and do further work and come back with some more costing.
Thank you. And just on that, I think, I mean, if the advocacy support, I guess, together that you provided for Director Grenier, I guess an issue would be, and we are talking electoral area directors, if they wanted to get together, instead of having staff individually helping 4 or 6 or 8 EA directors with their specific project, then I guess we'd be looking at as a group now, let's get the electoral area directors together and advocate for them as a group rather than, because that's going to be less time consuming than doing all these little individual projects, correct?
Yes, I mean, that model, like what you're explaining there, sounds more towards going to support, where a staff time, devoting more staff time to supporting this kind of more direct advocacy letters of support that we're working on from a staff perspective. Using the Tranquil example, if I may, and Director Graney, you could speak to this. That was primarily led by him and community people in the community doing direct advocacy. He was keeping us as staff apprised to what he was doing, sort of as an FYI, so we're aware of the communication he was having, but it was really led by him, not by staff.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So I would agree with Director Granier and Director Sao. I think we have a capacity issue of just how much we can be involved, but we're making progress, and I really would not like to take my foot off the pedal in terms of advocacy. So I would definitely agree with them on that. I'm thinking maybe we could look at maybe increasing some of that advocacy. At the very corner of Area I, there is a company called Litnet, and it actually runs across the Fraser Valley Regional District and the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. They've had a backbone project that has been in the works since before the fires, since before the atmospheric river. And they have hit a number of stumbling blocks as they try to build this backbone from Boston Bar to Bridge River to increase internet connectivity and safety for when internet does go out because there is an atmospheric river or whatever happens. I would also really like to see more connectivity along the highway corridors for safety. So I would be in favor of this recommendation, but the recommendation maybe changed it, that board direct staff to see what level of advocacy involvement TNRD should undertake in advancing rural and remote internet connectivity in the region, because I definitely think we need to play a part in it. And I think we could be more productive in the way we're handling it. Thank you.
Thank you. So would you like to make that motion?
I would, please.
Oh, okay.
Do you want
And
me to
could
repeat
could
it?
Pardon me?
Do you want
Yes,
me to
please.
repeat it? That the committee of the whole recommend that the board direct staff on what level of advocacy involvement TNRD should undertake in advancing rural and remote internet connectivity in the region.
Hang on just
So
a sec.
basically it adds one word.
So I think though that staff just, and Mr. Vieira, if you could clarify, they're looking to see that we recommend provide direction to staff, and they're saying that we recommend to staff that they continue with advocacy. Or I suppose if you wanted to get staff's take on how much staff time it's going to take, the board could direct staff, and I hate doing motions on the fly. So this is not a motion, this is just me thinking out loud. The board could direct staff to report back on the time and the staff time that would be involved in, say, stepping it up to the support level.
I'm not sure if I'm talking about in terms of support. I'm saying increasing advocacy. I think we're not at the part where we can really add that much support. I really think we need to push that advocacy and work more effectively on our advocacy. That's my personal view.
So then it could be something like, and this is just again ballparking, the committee of the whole recommend that staff continue with advocacy and look at ways of expanding or increasing that advocacy work as opportunities arise.
Potentially, I was just suggesting that they look at what level of advocacy we can actually have. So in other words, a capacity report in terms,
Right.
because maybe we don't have the capacity to do a ton of advocacy and we can only do X, Y, or Z.
Mr. Vieira, Mr. Skrepnik, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and maybe part of the problem was the way we worded the recommendation, but to reiterate what the chair said, the recommendation is that you provide us with some direction if you want it to change. So currently, the strategic plan says the connectivity is part of board advocacy. So we as staff support the board in doing that advocacy through Corbin's role. Often, CEO Hildebrandt's involved in that. And an example of that is what had just happened in Tranquil with Director Grenier. So that's the status quo. So we need no direction to continue on advocacy. We only need direction if this committee wants to increase to a different level, support or participate fully in developing infrastructure. We do not currently have the capacity to do that support or participate. So if you wanted to increase to that level, then we would have to come back with further information of what that looks like.
So I might just give an example. So when this was discussed at the EA directors meeting in the fall, some particular areas, and Director Grenier referenced them, were talked about as, areas where directors felt there was gaps around service and, should be prioritized. So if we were at a support level and we were devoting some staff time to this and we were kind of aware and talking to the telecom providers, we might be aware that there's already an ongoing project to bring service to that area and that we shouldn't be advocating for it because it's already being addressed by the industry itself, right? So to Mr. Vieira's point, the support level would require more time and resources, but it would likely enhance our advocacy because staff would be spending time and just more situationally aware of what's going on.
I'm not quite sure how to do this then, but I would like to see that there is an increased advocacy piece happening because again, I've been working on the Litnet issue. I know Director Grenier was working on the Tranquil Valley issue. So if we had more staff resources to help with the advocacy, I think it might be beneficial to our residents.
Mr. Vieira, suggestions on what that?
Yeah,
could look like?
I guess one other thing I wanted to add in, we don't have expertise on connectivity in-house here. So again, moving to that support level, we have some knowledge and understanding, but no one on staff is an expert. So again, if you want increased support, we'd have to look at increasing either staff or consultants to help support on that. Increasing advocacy by you, the board members, you don't need direction on that. You can continue to increase that advocacy and do what you're doing. But our current level of support is what we can provide from a staff perspective. Any of that?
So if you wanted to continue with the advocacy, but if you could continue with the advocacy, that status quo, that would not need a recommendation. And it would also not need any kind of recommendation, but EA directors would be able to come to you with asks, if you will, for more advocacy on certain issues. And staff would tell us when we were getting to the point where we now need to start looking at maybe hiring that extra resource or going to a consultant.
It's a tough one. I guess we've got one advocacy role, and that's Corbin. And right now our focus is on a number of things that with our advocacy tour that we're doing. So to go and shift that now to specifically to connectivity is going to slow something else down. So I guess that's the problem is we've got one dedicated resource for advocacy and First Nations, and he's up to here right now, making sure that's happening. And we've been very successful. So I don't know if we want to slow that down either. So that's, I guess, our concern is the general managers can all start doing this, but then something else has got to give. We're just trying to figure out how we can manage this effectively so that it's meeting the expectations of the board.
Okay, so we do not currently have a motion on the floor because it was not seconded. So Director Thorpe, I mean, if you want to have a think about maybe how we might want to reword that or, and you don't have to come up with something right this second. I know if I see Director Grenier, I've got a list here.
So Mike, help me out here.
So I'm going to go to you, Director Grenier, next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this discussion. We had been, staff on our behalf have been asking connected communities to come speak to us. I think given this recent decision, they may be inclined to do that. And I'm also wondering if staff might be able to invite companies like TELUS, Rogers, and Bell as well. And if we could, through advocacy at least at an EA level, if not at a full board, because I recognize this is a rural, mostly a rural issue, but it seems to me that we would increase the advocacy as Director Thorpe has suggested, and increase the advocacy not just from individual EAs to a broad EA basis. I think that that's what I think would be useful to our constituents, and most efficient use of staff time is to see if we can get these folks to our table and work out solutions perhaps on the areas that we've identified. Mr. Skrepnik, that might be a good continuation of our time. I would also suggest to EA directors that we may want at our next EA meeting to commit some dollar figure that is satisfactory to everybody, that is useful to staff to understand how important this issue is to our constituents. So I would be supportive of that, and supportive of Director Thorpe's initiative to increase advocacy.
Thank you. So something like, again, ballparking, direct staff to continue with current advocacy efforts and ask service providers to come to address the board as a delegation to assess options that are available, something like that.
And include connected communities, who I think will be more likely to comment now that this decision has come down. Staff have not had a chance to read this decision, and neither have EA directors for that matter. And I think it's going to be quite useful. I think that the CRTC is saying to connected communities and to TELUS, come up with solutions for rural. And if you're going to disconnect somebody, you got to pay $6,000. So there's the context of whether you're going to disconnect them. You might be better off now to start funding some of these connective services rather than to pay people $6,000. I think that staff needed a bit of time to digest this, as do we. But I think advocacy, increased advocacy on a board level or on an EA level would be most useful for our constituents.
Madam Chair, could I refer this to an EA committee meeting? There's an opportunity for the EA directors to sit around and discuss exactly the type of motion we want to see come forward. It would, we're just sort of struggling right now because we haven't had a full opportunity to have an in-depth discussion, and we could do that at an EA committee meeting. Whatever, I'm not sure on the timelines, but we have had a few requests of who we would like to come and present and the information that we're looking at. So I would recommend that this goes to an EA directors meeting, so we can, all 10 of us can sit around and have a discussion as to the best way to move forward. If that works, I don't need to make, do I need to make that a recommendation, or do we just do that?
If we don't make a motion, does status quo stay, or do we need to, should we have a motion just for formality's sake? No, I'm seeing heads shaking. CEO Hildebrand.
Thank you. I just got a comment that if we defer this to the end of March EA meeting for a discussion, the next one wouldn't be until May. So if you're willing to wait until middle of the year, that's fine. I didn't, some direction here would be helpful.
My thought is it should at least be made, but gives everybody a chance to gather the information, and it doesn't put all that much stress on the staff to come up with some sort of information, by our March EA directors meeting. That works.
Director Thorpe, are you good with that?
I was going to actually go with your motion, but add increased advocacy. Strategies to increase advocacy. But then we're moving before May, but it depends what majority want.
Maybe through the staff, is March too soon, or can we do it in March, or does May work better? I guess that's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends what the expectation is. We can certainly put this on the agenda in March, bring this report forward with the attachment that's in the blue folders here for discussion, extend the invitations. Like, we can't promise the delegations are gonna appear, but it could definitely get put on the March agenda for
Yeah.
continued
Yeah,
discussion.
that would probably be a good idea, and then we can get some more direction from the EA directors as to where we should be going after the March meeting.
Yeah, so that would be the March electoral area directors committee meeting. Okay. But until that point, advocacy will continue as it is right now.
Correct. And I wanted to follow up on Director Grenier's comment about inviting telecoms and connected communities. All of that is what staff are already doing within the existing advocacy role. So we don't need any direction on that. Happy to extend those invitations to the board or to those groups to present to committees and board.
Just a comment, I think if we invite any of the different groups down, I think it should be to a committee of the whole meeting, because then all of the board will hear the same reports that we're getting. And I think we need to have the discussion on the March EA directors meeting to get some good directions to how it would work best.
Okay, Director Blackwell, you've been very patient.
Yeah, thank you. I've been on the connectivity file since basically the first thing I was assigned to as a counselor back in 2011 or 12. Few comments. One, we looked at Caslo 10 years ago. Caslo was successful because they were able to put a fiber optic cable down the middle of Kootenai Lake without hanging on poles or digging into the ground. That's why it's successful. So that's a very simple read. Anybody can look that up. It doesn't require staff to dig into that model. I'm all for advocacy. I'm not for spending any extra staff time on this. If the board as individuals want to take the opportunity at UBCM or other opportunities like Silga to go and press the telecoms, because they almost always put a booth there, and do it in their own time, that's fine. But the technology on this changes so rapidly that it's almost a waste of time spending anything extra or creating reports on this, because as many have already said, they're obsolete by the time they're actually published. My iPhone now lets me send non-emergency text messages via satellite from anywhere that I can see the sky. I mean, that's a 3-month-old technological increase, and I'm quite sure it'll switch to the whole rest of the platform. So, these things happen so quickly. I started with ExploreNet that was incredibly slow operating in 3 of my campgrounds in Wells Gray Park that I didn't have satellite system. What I could do with a Starlink in those places right now is probably 50 to 60 times what that is, and that's in about a 7-year span. So, also being on this file for that long, knowing how much you actually can influence with the telecoms, which quite frankly are pirates, and can do what they want and really don't care about little things like us unless there's already the opportunity through some sort of federal or provincial grant to do expansion of service. You really have less influence than you think. You can embarrass them all you like. Quite frankly, they don't care. That's not really what they're worried about. If there is a financial advantage for them, they will take it and they will do that work, but that will be the thing that moves along. It will be a federal government decision to throw a whole bunch of money at it, but it's not going to be generally us. So lobby your MP, don't particularly worry about lobbying TELUS or Rogers and that sort of thing. Push it at whoever is the leading party in government. I'm going to lose my train of thought here, but yeah, this is not just a rural issue. This is not just an EA issue. So it should not just go to an EA table for discussion. Cell phone service and internet service is block by block in my town. My cell phone doesn't work inside my house. I joke constantly when I'm doing radio interviews that I have to take my truck to the end of the driveway, and I am in a straight line 5 kilometers from the TELUS tower in the middle of my town. So this is not just about rural. This is, or EA or remote. It is everywhere in British Columbia that is not a major city. The connectivity issues in our town, when we're talking 1050, Less than 2 or 3 years ago, in most of Clearwater, it was 1.5 or 1.10. At the same time, I was meeting with provincial officials on this in Victoria, and they're going, "Oh yeah, so yeah, no, it must really suck. Yeah, my house is 5,200," and I'm like, "Cool." I still hear that funny noise that when I connect to the internet, like dial up at 52 kilobytes per second. And there were people in my town that had that, and there were people in my town that had 0 internet connection. So at that point, 47% of the high school kids in Clearwater had no internet connection, and they weren't all living outside the town boundaries. And some of those places still do not to this day have full internet connection. So this is a TNRD-wide problem, but at the same time, it's being solved by technology, and it's being solved by large money from other places. Continue the lobbying. Don't waste staff time on it.
Director Houghton, you two have been very patient. I see no, you're good. Okay. In that case, I have alternate Director McCann, and then I have Director Laird.
This is a little bit on a whole different side of the topic, but earlier on, you said that there are 3 places where people pay taxes, and I happen to be one of those areas. What does that get paid on? Like, what's that money going to? I have no clue.
I think that in reference to the economic development service where we tax for. So we have an economic development function in electoral area A and B that funds mostly tourism and marketing for that area. And then in electoral area I, there is funding tax for economic development that goes to support Gold Country.
And Director Laird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Director Grenier's and dealing with the Tranquil Valley is exactly the sort of things that we're looking for. You actually hold the provider accountable for their actions. And I don't think we're looking for anything huge. And, we all know that we can't afford cell towers and all that sort of thing, but what we're looking to is the ability to do exactly what Director Grenier does is hold the current providers accountable for how they provide service to our communities. And I think that's an important part of advocacy. And I think that's what we want to look at as a EA committee meeting. That there's a lot of discussion that we have to have. And a lot of our areas don't even have the ability to even get any sort of cell service, no matter where they stand outside their house or anywhere. So this is what we're looking at improving. We're not looking at fixing the world. We all know how quick technology changes, but I still think we need to hold providers accountable for the service they're providing, and that's what we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else right now? Okay, Director Lepso, Director Hayward.
So what I see is when I hear the word increased advocacy, I see support is what you're asking for. You're not asking, so you're asking for more than what you have now. So you're actually asking for support. And I also agree with the director from Clearwater. I'd like to have us all involved if possible.
Thank you, Director Hayward.
So I agree with a whole bunch of people. And I disagree with some too. But what I'd really like to say is I want to thank the staff. It's a lot of work to go and check all this out and see what's happening because as I know, because I'm in literacy outreach, it changes daily. And we are never, as a TNRD, going to be able to stay on top of that because we aren't those big corporations that are doing this job and changing it daily. So I think advocacy, it could be in a support way, not necessarily a dollar way. I think we just need to be more aware and we need somebody on staff who can keep checking out on that specific ask, what's happening. And especially with what's going on in the States right now and all around the world, more and more people want to be connected because they want to know if they need to get under the bed or not. That's the kind of world we're living in. So I thank you to staff. I think you've done a great job, but I think myself personally, I'm not in a rush to spend money because by the time we spend the money and it gets built, we will be so behind the times, it will be a shame. So that's my 2 cents worth.
And Vice Chair Smith.
Yeah, I think you sort of nailed it, Jill. District of Logan Lake has been working on this specific issue for a really, really long time, pre-COVID. We took advantage of the opportunity for funding a few years back to survey the community and get a sense of what our levels were at. They're no better today, and that was probably 6 years ago. So obviously, as Director Blackwell mentioned and everybody else too, the technology changes so fast that you think you're getting, you're starting to get somewhere, but before you gain much traction, things have changed. So I'm hopeful that the decision that's come out is actually going to be in our favor at the District of Logan Lake, but it definitely is region-wide. And I do the exact same thing as Director Blackwell. I have to drive up to the top of the hill so that I can get proper cell service to have a conversation on my cell phone. So I think that there is some level of support that's going to be required from staff to educate themselves on the programs and where there might be pockets of availability to make things happen. I think there's going to be required a little bit more work on the part of staff, but I think that probably just keeping on top of things and knowing what's happening out there in the world and keeping us apprised of what opportunities that you do see along the way is much appreciated. And I appreciate the work and the work of the EA directors on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other hands? Okay, so I'm going to try and wade into this and see if I'm correct. I think what I'm hearing is an appetite for the EA directors to discuss possibly the implications of this report amongst themselves. And there was a suggestion from staff that they might, if they want to increase the advocacy efforts, move more into the support to discuss possible funding for that. So that would be a discussion for the EA directors to have. And then for everyone, for this to come back to the committee of the whole meeting possibly at the end of March, with or without delegations from some of the stakeholders to hear from them and the Connected Community Fund, but also then to hear maybe once staff have had a chance to digest the results of this decision or the implications of this decision that has recently come out, then we can all hear it and then maybe have a clearer idea of where we want to move or if we want to budge the advocacy needle and what that's going to look like. Is that kind of the gist? Sure. I'll need to go get more coffee. So the too long didn't read version is EA directors are going to have a discussion amongst themselves, and we as a whole, as a committee of the whole, can expect to revisit this probably at the end of March, with or without delegations from interested outside parties. Okay, sold. All right. And no motion needed. Awesome. All right, one last chance for anyone to have the final word. Gentleman at the back, no one wants to have the final word? Okay. Well, if I'm reading my agenda correctly, then we have come to the end of the agenda. So thank you very much for your attention. Enjoy your weekend and we are adjourned.